The New York Mets traded for Brewer starter Freddie Peralta yesterday, which is frustrating because the Braves had a deal in place for him last month and didn't pull the trigger. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on into Braves Today, your source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball, and you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, where we publish Braves Today newsletter daily. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app or go to FanDuel.com to get started. In a few minutes, we're going to get to some of the new projections for the NL East and the World Series and all of that, because a lot of different sources, whether it's Fangraphs predictions, FanDuel, things like that, are high on the Mets after all these moves they made. But let's talk about, and we'll talk about all those and who should win the East. But before we do that, let's talk about Freddie Peralta being acquired by the Mets. The deal broke last night, and it was Freddie Peralta and swingman Tobias Myers from the Brewers, and in return, going back to Milwaukee, two prospects, Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat. And this could potentially be two starters for New York at the end of the day. Myers made 6 starts among 22 appearances last year, had a 3.55 ERA for Milwaukee. He's a 27-year-old that was drafted out of high school by the Orioles. And as a starter, 1-1, 5.64 ERA. He wasn't good as a starter. As a reliever, 16 games, 1.91 ERA. He was often pitching multiple innings. We'll see what New York wants to do here. But the frustrating thing is, and members of the Braves Today Discord learned about this last month when I first heard about it. But per source that I spoke with, the Braves had an offer or had a deal in place to acquire Freddie Peralta back in December. It would have required moving J.R. Ritchie. He was the centerpiece of the deal. And the holdup on Atlanta's end was finding out about an extension with Freddie Peralta. And we've seen the Braves make some of these deals before where they make the trade and then almost immediately or soon after an extension is announced, right? Matt Olson extended like the next day. Sean Murphy was like the next week or something like that. Chris Sale signed an extension pretty quickly, which gave him an extra year and got rid of all of his deferred money and all of that stuff. But from all appearances, Peralta was not open to an extension with Atlanta. I never got official confirmation, but I would assume that's why the deal did not go through. I was told that they wanted to find out about an extension before they officially pulled the trigger, and I'm assuming the reason it never went through is because of the lack of an extension on Freddie Peralta. So the Mets instead trade two pretty decent prospects, Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat, to Milwaukee to get Peralta instead. Both of these guys, Baseball America has them as 45s on the 20 through 80 scouting scale, and they're both among the top 10 prospects for the Mets. Jet Williams is a position player, does a lot of like second base, does some shortstop, does some center field, right? They're both in the top 100 prospects on Baseball America. And, I mean, he's like 5'7", but it's defense that plays up the middle, really good speed, a strong arm, and a surprising amount of power. It's kind of funny that you saw Milwaukee take another shorter guy because Milwaukee's entire rosters on the position player side is just full of short kings. And I'm starting to wonder if this is like an undertapped thing in player selection for the Brewers. Because if you look at their entire 40-man roster right now, their entire active Major League roster right now, they have 2 outfielders over 6 foot in Garrett Mitchell and Christian Yelich. And they have 1 infielder over 6 foot in Tyler Black, who I think is a corner infielder. Trying to remember, second or third or something like that. Everybody else, both their catchers, 5'10", 5'11". A lot of their infielders, 5'11", 5'10", 5'10". Caleb Durbin's 5'7". Jet Williams, who will start in the minors, 5'7". Like, it's just a thing for them, right? And then Brandon Sproat is the other guy, 6'3" righty out of the University of Florida. Gave up 11 runs in 20 2/3 innings down the stretch last year. Remember, Mets pitching just absolutely collapsed, right? And he, like, the overall numbers were not good, but his first 2 starts were. At Cincinnati, 6 innings, 3 runs, 7 strikeouts, which in Cincinnati, you'll take that. Quality start. His next start at home against Texas, 6 scoreless innings, no walks, 6 hits, 3 strikeouts. And then he got tagged for 4 runs on 4 innings against Washington and 4 runs and 4 2/3 innings on the road in Miami. So he ended up with a 4.79 ERA. But even then, remember that New York's defense was terrible. He had a 2.80 FIP. So he was doing his part on the things he could control. Remember, fielded independent pitching is walks, strikeouts, home runs. Things the pitcher directly controls. Everything else is at the whims of the defense, right? And he was not getting the results from the defense. And that's part of the reason New York did such a drastic reset this winter. So both of those guys, top 100 prospects per Baseball America, 45s overall on the 20 through 80 scouting scale, to the Brewers. And the return was a swingman and Freddie Peralta, who's on a 1-year deal, by the way. He could be gone after this season. Again, Atlanta did not make the deal back in December because they wanted the extension before they did it. And again, I told Braves Today Discord members that back in December. So, when I heard about it, that's where I took it. And I was waiting to see if the deal went through or not. I made all the graphics. I had everything ready to go for a live show after the trade, and it never happened. But this is just, it's a very high price to pay for 1 year of Freddie Peralta. The equivalent deal, if you go off of the prospect ratings from Baseball America, the equivalent deal for Atlanta, the only 245 overall prospects that Atlanta has per Baseball America is J.R. Ritchie and Cam Caminiti. Now, again, I don't know what the original deal, who else was in the original deal other than knowing it was not Cam Caminiti. I knew J.R. Ritchie was in the original Peralta deal that Atlanta had discussed with Milwaukee. But you can absolutely see how trading your top 2 pitching prospects for 1 year of Freddie Peralta was not going to work. They didn't want to trade one of the 2 without getting some sort of extension in place so that Peralta wouldn't be gone after 1 year. Because that's the nightmare scenario, right? You trade a guy, you have him for 1 season, and then he walks in free agency, and the guy that you traded is on that other team for, 6-7 years. It reminds me of the Braves acquiring Mark Teixeira from the Rangers in July 2007. They sent 5 major leaguers, including Elvis Andrus, Nefertali Feliz, Matt Harrison, and those guys were all major leaguers, and they all played for quite a while. Andrus was runner-up for Rookie of the Year that first year that he finally debuted in Texas. It wasn't the same year, obviously. But, he ended up, in his career, 269 average. I think he's in the Rangers Hall of Fame now. And he was a Braves prospect that they gave away for what ended up being 1 year of Mark Teixeira because they flipped him at the deadline because they weren't in contention. And then, so that's the whole thing behind the Peralta deal. Sometimes the best trades are the ones you don't make. And Alex Anthopoulos did not want to trade J.R. Ritchie who you will probably see at some point in 2026, did not want to trade J.R. Ritchie without knowing they would have Peralta for more than one season. It's also an expensive deal from the perspective of Peralta's overall skill level. I don't necessarily know if he is as good as we think he is, but he's joining a revamped Mets lineup. They added a bunch of pieces in the last couple days. We'll break that down next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Encase Cards, custom card manufacturer. It's a really awesome plan. You upload your source photos. I went with youth sports. My son played baseball it was t-ball for, in this case, the card I have is the Chicago White Sox, but he also played on the Mariners and the Brewers. You choose the background, the holographic options. They have this really cool card customizer built into the website. You put in the text you want, whether it's position, obviously name, birthday, birthplace, whatever. And they mock up the card for you. They've got designers to help if you need help with it. When you like the front and the back, they print it on high quality cardstock, they slab it, and they throw it into a plastic case with a built-in stand so it can sit right on your desk, your mantle, wherever it might be. Go to ncasecards.com, ncasecards.com. Promo code Braves today gets you 20% off your order. Again, custom sports cards at ncasecards.com. Promo code Braves today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsey Crosby. I'm not convinced that Freddie Peralta was worth 245 overall top 100 prospects. He had a very good season last year. There are pros and cons here, okay? Let's go over this. 17-6 last year. Pitcher wins are dumb. Let's not take that at face value to say he's awesome. 2.70 ERA. I will point out that unlike New York, Milwaukee had a very good defense last year. 2.70 ERA, 3.64 FIP, 3.43 expected ERA. And if you look back at his previous seasons, the last 3 years, 22, 23, 24, every time he had been 360 to 380, kind of around that same realm. And he got the overperformance versus the inputs in 25, right? I mean, again, field and independent pitching right in line with what he had produced the last couple seasons, but the ERA was down to a 2.70, okay? He is, don't get me wrong, he's a very good pitcher. I think he's probably cast well as a number 2, predominantly four-seamer, like 50% four-seamer, just about 95 miles an hour. Changeup, curveball, slider, and he throws all 4 pitches to both-handedness. Now, lefties don't see a bunch of sliders, like 3%. He ramps up the changeup against lefties, which is a common thing you see righties do, so they have something that moves away from the lefty. But he's primarily fastball to both sides. And this feels like a guy that they wouldn't have acquired under Jeremy Hefner. Because Jeremy Hefner, what does he want you to do? He wants you to throw multiple fastballs and to maybe sequence a little more than Peralta maybe necessarily does. Peralta's primarily four-seam fastball, and he got good results on it. Individual pitch results are not incredibly not sticky year to year, because if you think about some of the sample sizes, it doesn't make a lot of sense to say, oh, well, his slider only allowed a 203 average, because the slider also had 30 balls put into play. It's a very small, maybe the whiff rate is legitimately can tell you something, but the overall batting average and slug on a pitch, I've come to learn that it doesn't mean as much as we think it does, simply because these sample sizes are often pretty small. So take that for what it's worth. I think he's perfectly fine as a number 2. He may be a little stretch, but perfectly fine as a number 2. In Atlanta, you could argue he would have been your number 4. Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach. I'm a believer that Spencer Strider's going to be back. We played that video from Jeremy Hefner going on MLB Network Radio with CJ Nikowski a couple weeks ago. They think they figured out what happened to Strider. They think he's going to be better. They've already seen better results over the winter. You could argue that Freddie Peralta would have been the number 4 here in Atlanta. Behind those 3 guys, he would have been ahead of Ronaldo Lopez and would have maybe given Atlanta the ability to move Ronaldo Lopez to the pen if they wanted. But everything they've said all winter is that Lopez is going to be a starter. And there's been a conversation I've seen a lot recently in the wake of this deal about Peralta's one of those guys that's guaranteed to give you innings, right? And that's kind of the same argument that you're getting with Chris Bassett. Everybody's saying, well, like, hey, Chris Bassett is another guy where he's going to post every day. And in the interest of radical transparency, I've made that same argument about Bryce Elder, that Bryce Elder is going to post. He's never been on the injured list with Atlanta, and he's going to post. And it's true that in the last 3 seasons, Peralta's made 30 or more starts, right? 30 in 23, 32 starts in 24, 33 starts in 25. He has 3 consecutive seasons of qualifying on ERA leaderboards by pitching 1 inning per team game. Just like Bassett has 4 years of that, 22, 23, 24, 25. It is correct that they have posted, but I think it's important to remember the way that modern pitching works is you're healthy until you're not. If you remember going back to the offseason after 2023, Atlanta tried to get Aaron Nola away from the Phillies when he went to free agency. And one of the arguments that people made when they heard about this and said, I think that's a good deal, was the fact that Aaron Nola had posted, right? Going into that winter, he had 5 straight seasons, technically 6 if you count the short in 2020, where he had made all of his starts, right? He had made 32 or more starts in the 5 previous full-length seasons, and he made 12 starts and threw 71 innings in the 60-game 2020 season. And after he got re-signed by Philly, in 24, he led baseball with 33 starts. And then last year, he got hurt, made only 17 starts, threw under 100 innings, and had an ERA of 6. Right? Guys are healthy until they're not. Pitchers are healthy until they're not. And I really, at this point, the way that baseball works, it almost feels like you can't say, hey, we're going to sign this pitcher because he's always healthy and he's guaranteed to give you innings, because no pitcher in baseball is guaranteed to give you innings. That's just what we've learned at this point. But when you look at but that's something they're going to be counting on. They're going to need Freddie Peralta to give them a full slate of starts, because their rotation right now is Freddie Peralta. It's David Peterson, who last year made 30 starts. Clay Holmes, who first season converting to the rotation from relief, I was impressed. 165 and 2/3 innings and an ERA right around 3.5. And typically, those reliever to starter conversions seemingly cap out at 110 to 130 on innings in their first year. He went 165. Part of that was they had to have him do it because they just had no pitching. But Sean Manaea, 12 starts, 60 innings. Kodai Senga, 22 starts, 113 innings. They're asking Nolan McLean, the prospect. He made 8 starts last year. They've got him slated as the number 2 behind Peralta right now. Like, they need guys who can give them length. And they need starters, and they have to have Freddie Peralta in the lineup all year, or in the rotation all year. And when you look at what they've done, they've made a lot of moves recently, right? They lost out on Kyle Tucker. They pivoted to Bo Bichette, who they are paying a ton of money to play third base for them, a position that he has never played. They popped a qualifying offer on him for 3 years, $126 million, so $42 million a year, and he could opt out after 27 or 20. I guess it's player options he has to pick up for 27 or for 28. They traded for Luis Robert from the Chicago White Sox, $20 million a year for this season, with a player option of $20 million for 2027. They signed Jorge Polanco to a 2-year, $40 million deal. They're going to have him at first base, a position he's barely played in the majors. And what's funny, honestly, is despite Bichette having never played third, and despite Polanco having played a grand total, I'm looking here, of 1 game at first base in his career, they'll probably defensively still be better than Mark Vientos at third and Pete Alonso at first. They subtracted Jeff McNeil to get Marcus Semien. 3 seasons of Marcus Semien, $26 million this year, $26 million in 2027, and $20 million in 2028. And from a defensive perspective, he's still pretty good. From an offensive perspective, Marcus Semien has not been. He has 2 consecutive seasons, his last 2 seasons with Texas. Together, he hit .234 with a .686 OPS. 38 home runs combined. This is a dude that at one point in time had a 45-homer season himself. It's a 100 OPS plus, so it's at least average. But before you look at these 2 years, he had been like in his prime in Oakland, and then even when he got to Texas for the first time, he had been putting up 123s and stuff. They've added pieces, right? It's felt a little panicky. It's felt a little disjointed and kind of in response to losing on Tucker. They got Bichette, things like that. But are they really better? And I've been a little bit surprised by where a lot of the projection systems, the sports books and things like that have put the Mets after these moves in relation to the Phillies and the Braves. We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsey Crosby. I don't think the Mets should be the favorite to win the East. Like, maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't feel like that should be how it works right now. I'm not as big of a believer in these changes as some other people are. And when you look at division odds, World Series odds, WAR projections, and all of that, it tells a really interesting story, okay? So Fangraphs does WAR by team, okay? They project out the WAR for every team. They also project out the WAR for the remaining free agents. If you made a team of the remaining free agents, it says that would be the best team in baseball, but I think that's all the free agents combined. Anyway, Dodgers have the number 1 WAR projection at 54.3 WAR from their current roster. That's both pitching and hitting and fielding. Yankees at 47.4. I feel like that's really too high. It's really carried by Aaron Judge and then Ben Rice behind the plate. Ben Rice and Austin Wells behind the plate. Ben Rice is much better as a catcher than he is as a first baseman offensively, but he's much better defensively at first base. It's weird. And then third, they have the Mets. They have the Mets at 46.6 WAR as the number 2 National League projection, number 3 overall in WAR. Mets at 46.6 at third. 5th in baseball is the Braves at 45.4. 7th in baseball is the Phillies at 43.9. And you're really banking on the offense, right? You're banking on Juan Soto to still be Juan Soto, which he will be, let's be honest. You're banking on Bo Bichette to be Bo Bichette still, which he probably will be this first season. You're banking on a lot of guys to not slump, right? Or to not be bad. You're banking on Francisco Alvarez to be really good behind the plate, which I just don't know if I believe that. I mean, they have the Mets getting like the 8th best WAR from their catchers. They have Mets catchers providing more WAR than the Braves catchers. They have the Mets catchers who right now, again, it's Francisco Alvarez, who is not bad when he's healthy. He's been hurt a lot though. And backup Luis Torrens producing 4.1 WAR. In Atlanta, they have Drake Baldwin and Sean Murphy, and whatever veteran is needed to initially take the place of Sean Murphy when the season starts, they have them putting up 3.8 WAR. I kind of don't think that's going to be the way that it works. They also have the Phillies very low. They're not believers in JT Realmuto. It's like third worst WAR in baseball from catchers for Philly. And I think that's a combination of JT's getting old. They paid him for 3 years, which is wild. And the fact that there's nobody of quality behind him as a backup that can provide impact, right? It can provide WAR. But again, by the depth chart projections on Fangraphs, they have the Mets with the most WAR in the division. Braves second, Phillies third. When you go to FanDuel, Braves today sponsor FanDuel. We're not bad-mouthing FanDuel here. When you go to FanDuel, the NL East winner, they have the Phillies at number 1. They have the Mets at number 2. And they have the Braves at number 3. And then there's a big drop-off to the Marlins. And then there's a massive drop-off to the Nationals. The Nationals winning the East would be about as likely as the Rockies knocking off the Dodgers. But it's interesting to see the different projection systems, right? Because from a purely baseball standpoint, the Mets roster has a lot of offense there. From a defensive standpoint, from a clubhouse chemistry standpoint, there's a lot of people who are not believers in the Mets. Now, here's the thing. We've seen the Mets get hot in the postseason before. We saw it 2 years ago, right? Where they went all the way to the NLCS and they lost to the Dodgers. When you look at the teams favored to win the National League and go to the World Series, it's clearly still the Dodgers, plus 120, right? Okay. Mets are second at plus 700, then the Phillies at plus 750, then the Braves at plus 800. So again, by WAR, it's Mets, Braves, Phillies. For the division, it's Phillies, Mets, Braves. For the National League, it's Mets, Phillies, Braves. I think what we can say is there is bulletin board material up here for Atlanta. Because nobody right now is picking Atlanta to win the whole thing. And I know a lot of Braves fans aren't picking Atlanta to win the whole thing because the Braves have already been hit by injury to Ha-Seong Kim. But when you look at how these different teams rank out and the different projections at the different positions, right? Braves are right behind Philly for rotation WAR. It's within 1 win above replacement. And then when you look at the different positions, Atlanta is projected to be pretty decent across the board, right? The only areas that are below like 2.5 WAR is they have 2 WAR from shortstop and they have 1.9 WAR from left field, which is going to be a combination of Jurickson Profar and Mike Yastrzemski, right? Because Profar is going to DH a bunch early. And then when you have, let's say, Murphy back and Baldwin can DH some, you'll have Profar in left and all that stuff. But anyway, that's the only positions where they have Atlanta being down. And outside of that, it's just solid production across the board. They got 4.8 projected for Ronald and Wright. That feels like something that he can easily beat. Like that feels like a number that he can beat. It's 5th best in baseball. The only teams that have a better projection for right field are the Diamondbacks with Corbin Carroll, and it's right above that. Padres with Fernando Tatis, Mets with Soto, and Yankees with Judge. They've got Ronald out producing Kyle Tucker and Wright. When you look at first base, this is another area where I don't like. The Braves are one of the best in baseball. They've got Phillies and A's, so Harper and Kurtz 1 and 2, tied at 4 WAR. Oh, I'm sorry, Vladdy's at 5.1. I missed that. Vladdy's at 5.1. Phillies and A's are at 4. Braves are at 3.4. I don't think Matt Olson's going to hit 54 home runs. I'm not asking him to. But if he ticks up from, 29 last year to mid-30s or so, you could easily see him jump up into the top 3. And either way, if you look at like an all-star selection, he's top 3 right there. Center field's the big question mark for me, right? They have Braves at 3.7, which is the 5th best mark in baseball. He's behind Julio Rodriguez. He's behind Pete Crow Armstrong. He's behind Jackson Merrill, and he's behind Byron Buxton. A lot of that, though, is carried by Michael's defense. And that's part of the reason why the Cubs are so high is because, same thing, you're getting defense from Pete Crow Armstrong, the reason why Julio Rodriguez is far and away, superstar level, 6.2 WAR at center, is because he's doing it both defensively and offensively. I still think Michael can be that guy. The question is, does he or not? I think the big takeaway that I'm taking from this is there are legitimate reasons to doubt the Braves, right? It's all the injuries you've had the last couple seasons. It's continued this year, some underperformance from guys. But just as there are questions on the Braves, there are questions with the other teams in the division as well. Philly's just running it back with an older team. They paid more money for Schwarber to come back. They re-signed Real Muto to a 3-year deal. He's about to turn 35. They're going to be breaking in prospect Justin Crawford in center and be counting on a reclamation of Adolis Garcia in right. And if Garcia collapses or Crawford collapses, they're in trouble because they're going to get rid of Nick Castellanos. They've already said that. So they'll have to move Brandon Marsh to center. And then they'll have to figure out both sides of the outfield around him. They're not moving Harper back out there. They'll have to, even though you could argue they probably should, they'll have to figure out what to do around it, right? Like, it's rotation. No idea what's going to happen with Zach Wheeler. Still a good rotation. Christopher Sanchez, Jesus Luzardo, Aaron Nola. It's a pretty good 1 through 3, especially if you think Nola's going to rebound. But after that, Taijuan Walker was not good last year. They put him in the pen for a lot of it. Andrew Painter is a prospect. They're counting on him being in the rotation on opening day. There's a lot of questions with everybody at the top of the East, not just Atlanta. And so while they're third in a lot of the betting odds and the projection systems on finish, I think it's just as likely that Atlanta wins the division as anybody else. And honestly, it's going to come down to two things. It's going to come down to guys being healthy. We've already seen Atlanta hit by this a little bit. And it's going to come down to the stars being stars, right? The aircraft carriers have to lead the attack, right? I talked about this the other day. Like, at the end of the day, who plays shortstop doesn't matter for Atlanta. What Austin Riley does at the plate matters for Atlanta. And that's still where you are. And I still think that Atlanta can win this division. And, if you want to get a little bit of extra, if you want to put your money where your mouth is, FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app. This has been Braves Today for Thursday, January 22nd. We're going to try to do a live show on Friday. So make sure you're here. Turn on the notification bell on YouTube so you can hop in live in the chat, drop your questions and all that stuff. I always enjoy the live shows. Again, we're trying to get a live show in on Friday. In the meantime, do me a favor on audio. Leave a 5-star review. That'd be great. We got review bombed like a couple weeks ago where some folks went in and just left bad reviews on really all of the Braves pods, but hit ours pretty hard, which kind of sucked. So if you do us a favor, leave a 5-star review with some kind words. That'd be super helpful. And always, BravesToday.com, the written content, free or paid, those subscriptions really do support the show a ton. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.